What's up, everybody? It's Dakota, and today I'm going to be going over the winning World Championship deck from just this past weekend. Azorious Control by Paulo, Vitor, Damo, Rosa. Your, I think that's World Championship 26 champion. Uh, Basically, there was four main decks, and then there was like a rogue deck per se. There was a bunch of players on Team Reclamation, a bunch of players on Mono Red. Uh, Blue White Control was also one of the more popular decks that were on the upswing. And then there was another one, but like the main one, oh, and Fires of Invention. That's the one. So main decks were Fires of Invention, Blue White Control, the Team of Reclamation decks, and then Mono Red, which was basically expected. And then there was a Piotr Glukowski, who was playing Jun Sacrifice, the deck that he used to beat Brad Nelson in the finals of Mythic Championship 8, or I believe is what it was. But Blue White Control coming out on top, beating Jeskai Fires again in the finals, the player that he actually beat to start the day. So, what's going on in Blue White Control? Well, if you've played any Theros Beyond Death cards so far this standard season, you'll find out that Dream Trawler is probably one of the best creatures to be playing, besides Hydroid Krasis. Um, a 3/5 flying lifelink creature that can give itself hexproof by discarding a card and then draws a card when it attacks and even gets bigger as you draw cards is pretty good and just kind of closes out the game really quick considering you're swinging with a 5/5 lifelinker. Really hard to race this thing, honestly. Unless you're mono red and you have an Embercleave, then racing a Dream Trawler is pretty easy to say the least. But this card is just pretty insane. Uh, really taking strides in Pioneer. I play Blue Eye Control in Pioneer, and Dream Trawler is a house. It feels so good when it's in play, and your opponent almost just never can get rid of it. It's pretty awesome. Another card that Paulo decided to play in the main deck was Archon of Sun's Grace, which is a 4 mana 3/4 flying lifelink Archon that Pegasus creatures you control have a lifelink, and whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, you create a 2/2 Pegasus with flying. Really good when you have cards like Omen of the Sea that have flash, Birth of Meletus to search for basics or search for basic planes. Create a blocker that can stonewall mono red unless they have like a Embercleave or something like that to beat through, or if they just have like a bigger creature like Annex or a Steamkin with three counters on it, and then also gains you a little bit of life, which is pretty relevant, especially alongside the 4 Absorb, which definitely these cards are pretty big when mono red is in the format just to give you a few extra turns to try to set up and find answers to their board and deal with their threats. Banishing Light is like a catch-all removal spell for any problem permanent that your opponents might have in the blue-white mirrors. Obviously, like 3 mana Teferi, Jeskai Control, or Jeskai Fires, excuse me. This is really good against their Teferis, their Fires of Invention, their Cavaliers because they don't get their Dige triggers if you just banishing light them, and I believe they have like little to no way of getting a banishing light off the board, which is also really good. Another card that like Corey Baumeister was pretty high on and is kind of like overperformed since it's come out. Elspeth Conquers Death. Now, normally the third chapter or the last chapter on sagas is really powerful and ends up just kind of like pulling you way far ahead, or just gives you some big payoff for playing it. And while Elspeth Conquers Death does have a pretty big payoff in that it gets a creature or planeswalker from your graveyard and enters play with either a +1/+1 counter or an additional loyalty counter on it. A lot of the time, and from just what I saw from the event, that this card really wasn't ever getting a planeswalker back or a creature back, but just the first two chapters of it were just amazing on their own to like set up turns where you could resolve a dream trawler and your opponent couldn't cast a removal spell to kill it or anything like that, or really made it hard for them to like kind of combo through things like the Jeskai Fires deck and things like that. So just a really good card. Exile is a permanent with converted mana cost that an opponent controls that cost 3 or greater. Pretty good, considering, other than like Hydrate Krasis, which I don't think people were really playing Krasis this weekend, which was kind of surprising. This gets rid of Nissas, it gets rid of Narsets, Teferis. It can target a Dream Trawler. Obviously, they'll probably discard a card. Target opposing like Archons of Sun's Grace, Cavaliers, things like that. Just a really good card, and probably just alongside Dream Trawler as probably one of the best cards, and probably one of the reasons to be playing this deck. Thirst for Meeting is a pretty good draw spell when you're playing 12 enchantments. Shadow of the Sky, just a really powerful sweeper, especially one that you can find with Narset, and then you can play on turn 4 against like the mono red decks and things like that. Mystical Dispute is just a little bit more interaction where Absorb and Dovin's Veto kind of miss. Dovin's Veto obviously better in like the control matchups, and even partly in the other matchups where your opponent is sideboarding in Mystical Disputes as well. But Dispute does have its places where countering a Teferi or an Arset and then being able to leave up interaction or be able to play your own Teferi Time Raveler and leave up a counterspell potentially for your opponent's Time Raveler or whatever blue thing that they could resolve is also pretty good. The mana base, like 25 lands, is pretty stock, I think, for a control deck. One Castle Vantress versus three Castle Ardenvale, which is really surprising because I'd assume that it would probably be more Vantress than Ardenvale, if anything. But Ardenvale making a human token is a way to put a clock into play without having to commit actual mana to it until you're ready to start turning the corner. Castle Vantress smoothing out draws and things like that. And I guess now thinking about it, it makes sense to play less Castle Vantress and more Castle Ardenvale when you're playing for Omen of the Sea. Two Fable Passage to get some of your basic lands, playing 10 in this deck because having untapped lands is pretty sweet. Being able to play one Field of Ruin, just really good against like your opponent's Castle Ardenvales or Castle Vantresses, as well as like Blast Zone and things like that. For Hallowed Fountain, for Temple of Enlightenment, your blue white duels in the format. No reason to not play the four full copies of these. In the sideboard, I'm not really going to go over the sideboard because this card's hot. You should definitely be playing this card. Narset in the sideboard's pretty interesting. I'm assuming for like the other blue white decks and things like that, and the Jeskai Fires deck and that sort of thing. Glass Casket is some pretty good removal. Extra Dovin's Veto, because why not? Cerulean Drake and Aether Gust, because the red matchups are pretty can be pretty hard to beat if you're unable to interact with them, or like they get an Annex in play, and you sweep the board, and then like their Annex gives them a ton of tokens, and then you need another sweeper for all those tokens, and it's a hassle. And this sideboard also specifically is to counter the metagame that was created. I think the players had a general idea of like what decks could show up, so I mean the sideboards were tuned accordingly. So that's why I'm not going to get too into what's exactly going on here, because your sideboard will obviously change to your meta and things like that. But I like a lot of these cards that are in here. So basically going over just this deck list and like talking about it and everything, watching how everything played out over the weekend. I would say blue white was like a really good choice and might still continue to be a good choice going forward. Um, Definitely being interactive, but also being able to play really powerful threats like Teferi and Narset in the Planeswalker slot, and then obviously Dream Trawler and Archon of Sun's Grace. I definitely like Dream Trawler as a card. I'm very biased towards it because I have played with it, and it just takes over games. Like it literally just can pull you, put you back into a game that you probably had no business winning, and I really mean it. And you'll know the first time that you cast this card. Some things definitely to remember when playing this deck. Definitely not cutting the Bertha Miletus or Miletus, however you want to pronounce it. I'm pretty bad with names here. Um, Not cutting this card from like your main deck, even though it seems like it's pretty bad. This card does offer a lot of like basically like gains you a ton of life. Obviously the first chapter, like, you search for basic planes, no problem, but it ensures that you hit your third land drop, which opens up basically your entire like counter suite, all of your basically all of your spells except for like your haymakers, like Elspeth Conquers Death, closer to Shatter the Sky, and obviously it doesn't cast Dream Teller Archon of Sun's Grace, but it definitely gets you there in terms of like being able to develop your mana and play out these other things that will then help you hit your land drops as well. Um, then the O4 wall, and then the actual like chapter of gaining life can just gain you a ton of life over the course of a long game, which is obviously what you're playing to when you're control. Uh, so obviously, if like the wall blocks a 2 or 3 power creature for 2 or 3 turns, that gained you upwards of 6 to 9 life on top of like the 2 life it's already gained. So for 2 mana, you've ensured your third land drop and essentially gained over 10 life, which is really good when you're the control deck and all you need is time to really set up and get your dig your nails into the game. So that is my like deck techie type of like review for this deck. Congratulations to Paulo, obviously a few days after the event's over, but congratulations to him on winning the world championship. Well deserved. The wall of accolades just got longer. Definitely in the argument for the best player of all time, or the goat, if you will. So yeah, I mean that's pretty awesome, and definitely something that like I will look forward to discussing in a video on my opinions on that. But that's gonna do it for Azorious Control for standard. If you guys enjoyed the deck tech, or you just like listening to my voice, please consider subscribing to the channel, getting more videos like this. Definitely going over standard, modern, and pioneer on a weekly basis. Some other discussion type videos to come, like article form maybe. Just kind of going to experiment as we kind of move forward and try not to do nearly as much deck tech and strategy talk as we normally do. And also consider following my Twitch page, which hopefully we're going to be starting back streaming really soon. Kind of all the hectic stuff is starting to come to an end, and I look forward to getting back into that because I do really like doing that, or I do really like doing that, and I enjoy it. And it's a lot easier for me to do than to like record videos and things like that. So that'll be fun to see. But anyway, I appreciate you guys for watching the video. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you all in the next one.